A few. A few. Let's get into it. A few good movies. A few. A good. A few. Good. A few. Let's get into it. A few good movies.
Superheroes. They've dominated the box office for over a decade, with Marvel and DC leading the way, creating long-term strategies and cinematic universes. But what about the forgotten superheroes? The ones that aren't repped by a major comic book label? Welcome to A Few Good Movies with Chris Porto, Samer Esmail, and me, Zach Dehm. Today, we'll look beyond the superheroes of DC and the MCU and explore what else the genre has to offer. Today's topic, off-brand superheroes. I love when we rewatch movies and I'm reminded of lines that I used to love.
Yes. Oh my God.
It happened this week with my movie.
I think I know what you're going to say.
I love life.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, you want to dance? Me neither.
That's a good one too. See, there's so many. I found the movies, my movie this week to be very quotable. And this
Wait, are we? Is this it?
Oh yeah, we're going.
Oh, we are. Okay.
It was small talking.
Oh, okay.
Hey everybody, welcome to A Few Good Movies. I'm Zach Dehm, and with me is Chris Porto.
How's it going?
And Samer Esmail.
Hey guys, what's up?
So today we got a very fun topic. I think we've all been excited for this one. Chris, you look like you're not excited for this one.
Yeah, don't put words in my mouth, Zach.
We're doing off-brand superhero movies this week, and what that means is any movie that is not a DC or Marvel comic property. So we really wanted to expand outside of that world. The last decade or so, we've been sort of bombarded with Marvel all the time. But
yeah, and DC.
People forget that not that long ago, it really wasn't as prevalent as this. It was a whole different beast.
Yeah, there was probably a Spider-Man movie every 5 years, or like how long did the Raimi movies last?
Most of our high school experience. Right,
Yeah.
Chris?
So maybe like every other year.
I was in the second one.
Ooh.
Already getting to the fun stories. That's right. You were in the second movie.
Yeah, that was like 2003. It might have been 2002 when I was...
Did you cut class for it?
No, it was like weekends at 5 a.m.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wait, what part did you play?
I was an extra in the train sequence when he fights Dr. Octopus.
Ah.
That must have been my first year of college, so 2002.
And I remember that experience was like pretty amazing just to hear you talk about it and then waiting like a year and a half for it to come out.
Dude, it was awesome because it was filmed in Chicago. They didn't have a finished script yet, but they knew the sequence was going to be in the movie. It was like special effects shots mostly, but Sam Raimi was there directing and like standing right in front of me, and it was awesome. I got to take a picture with him before we broke for lunch. And yeah, it was like meeting one of your filmmaking heroes. It was really cool.
Did you ever see yourself?
Not in the theatrical, but there's a Spider-Man 2.1 like extended version. And I could see myself in there because that scene is longer.
Really?
I didn't even know that existed.
And I don't know if that must be on Blu-ray. I'm guessing. I have it on iTunes, but I haven't watched it.
I mean, I think that's regarded as the best Spider-Man, if not the best. Maybe it's still considered the best superhero movie.
I think it's up there.
I mean, it might be the best Spider-Man movie, but
I don't know. I think the new ones are really good. I think Tom Holland is a excellent Spider-Man.
He is fun.
I think Tobey Maguire is a better Peter Parker because Peter Parker's kind of a nerd. It's hard to rail on Sam Raimi because he's one of my favorites, but I do think the new ones are much better superhero films.
It was a different time.
Oh, wow.
It was a different time of filmmaking back then.
What's cool is
they pushed
Raimi,
that envelope.
Raimi's coming back to the Marvel universe. He's going to direct the next Doctor Strange.
Someone was removed from that project.
It was the director of the first one. I don't know what happened, but he's not doing it, and Sam Raimi stepped in.
They probably saw the movie is what happened.
I liked it. I'm gonna be the superhero defender on this episode. I can see.
Yeah.
Well, that leads me to the question I think we should start with is what do you guys think of superhero movies in general, especially like the Marvel comic universe and how there's a new huge Marvel movie out every year, and
not this year.
Not this year. But I guess where do you stand on sort of like the state of comic book movies?
So I'm a Scorsese stan now. I think Scorsese nails it that they're not necessarily great filmmaking movies, but they are spectacles and they're incredibly cinematic, and the action sequences are off the radar. Might cause epilepsies or seizures, but they are like kind of mind-numbing fun, which I'm not knocking that necessarily, but the way it's shot in the script even isn't necessarily clever anymore.
I mean, I would agree with that. Marvel's been doing this for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
With
When
the
did Iron Man come out?
Iron Man was like 2008. 12, 13 years is a long time to be building this sort of universe.
And there's like 30 movies there, right?
Yeah, 2008. And the movies are all interconnected, and I think that they did an amazing job with that. I also think that with Endgame, it sort of closed that chapter. They have to sort of branch out. We can't do the origin stories anymore where it's always the same, because
Right.
Doctor Strange origin story is kind of the same thing as Iron Man's origin story, where they're filming sort of the same film.
I was gonna say, I was thinking about that. It's like that's basically what their bread and butter has been this whole time, is origin stories. It's when the superhero character is struggling with his identity and his abilities and coming to terms with it, right? That's
Right.
sort of always the
That
theme.
is the theme with 99.9% of superhero movies.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be the only thing. And
It doesn't, but it almost always is.
If you look at Batman back in the 90s, Batman was already Batman, and he just was like already doing his thing.
Yeah.
He wasn't like struggling with his
right,
abilities.
but not with Batman Beyond though.
Right.
The
You
new
mean the
new Nolan ones, yeah.
Okay, so the Nolan ones, yeah, I'm
Batman
actually talking like
Begins.
Tim Burton.
Yeah. Yeah, there are like one or two exceptions, but
Even with
that is like
Even with Batman,
like
how many times have we seen Batman's parents murdered? Every
Right.
single Batman. So like we've moved beyond that. I think this new Batman that's coming out with Robert Pattinson, I would be shocked if they had Batman's parents murdered in this movie.
no, I mean they might have like a flashback or some
I
reference
don't
to
think
it,
they're
but
going to do it. I think the audience is so
It's-
smart about this stuff now that it's sort
Yeah.
Don't
of
need it.
it's already there. Like it's in the zeitgeist that we all know Batman's parents were killed.
Todd Phillips' Joker, that's an origin story of Joker.
Which it exists
And-
outside of the normal continuity of Batman, though.
Right, because it's a whole different. I guess Batman's parent, he dies from Joker. Spoiler alert for Joker, but it's not the way he dies in the comic books and other
Yeah.
movies. But it is this origin story of like we know Joker is insane, but through 90% of the movie, or maybe not 90, like 60% of the movie, he's not insane yet, or so we think. So he's like slowly becoming insane, and I feel like that's just like superhero storytelling 101. Like you have to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I think the idea is the only way for you to like believe in them or trust in them is to make them grounded and relatable. So you have to give them some type of trauma or event in their life that makes them that person. With the movies we talk about today, there's no, it's still the same. So let me ask you a question, Zach. Like, why are you a fan of the Marvel, DC movies, or
Not really.
Well,
Not really. I mean,
What-
not really. I'm okay with them now. When like Avengers came out, when the hype of like the first Avengers came out,
yeah,
I was so annoyed by it. Like I just didn't understand what the hype was all about.
You would be.
yeah. I
was just
remember
annoyed by it.
because I think didn't Avengers and The Dark Knight come out the same year, or like
I don't-
within a year of each other, and then people were like, if Dark Knight was nominated for Best Picture, then Avengers should be. And I'm like, I mean, The Dark Knight's not an amazing movie. I think that's a little overrated, but there's still filmmaking talent in that movie than Avengers, at least the first one.
I mean, it's a different type of talent.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
here's the thing, like the old Batman comics, the old Batman series, even the Burton movies, they're a little bit cheesy. And Christopher Nolan made them more realistic. He made it darker.
Yeah.
And I think he brought that like dramatic weight to this character that's been around for like 60 years. But at the same time, I think the Marvel films, it's just like really good escapist entertainment. And not all of them are great. Some of them are pretty mediocre. They come off this assembly line where they have the recipe down pat. Like they know exactly what
Right,
they're doing.
right.
They get sometimes very interesting filmmakers on board, and they have a blank check to create these worlds. They can get any actor they want, as long as they'll take the money.
Yeah.
And they've brought to life something that when I was a kid, I never thought would happen. Like, I was a huge comic book fan as a kid, and I loved the X-Men almost exclusively. I was never really into the Avengers until much later when the movies came out, where I actually explored some of that stuff. But, you know, I love the X-Men, and now looking back on those X-Men films, I'm like, wow, these are not that great at all. Compared to what Marvel is doing now, I hope Marvel can someday make a real X-Men movie.
That'd be interesting.
Without Bryan Singer's involvement, which wouldn't happen anyway.
So I guess my stance on it, I actually have come to really appreciate them because I do love going to a theater for a movie that's got a lot of hype, where the theater's packed and people are like cheering, and it's an experience that happens maybe less frequently than it used to do, but Marvel movies always do it.
Yeah.
You know, if you go...
Well,
there's always such hype behind them.
I agree with you. I think the hype is what really makes it intriguing to go see. Like, I think all of the movies, with maybe an exception for one or two, are like B+ movies. Like, they're never hitting it out of the park, but they're not. It's not so bad that you're like, why would they think this is good? It's like, it's not problematic in any way. It's like a fastball, you know. 90% of the time you're going to get it past the guy, but sometimes he's going to hit it out, you know. The biggest thing for me with Marvel is that their villains, I mean, some of them I don't even remember. Like, who was the villain in the first Iron Man? I don't even remember who it was.
It was Obadiah Stane.
Oh my God.
I didn't even look that up.
Yeah, but Robert Downey Jr. is so perfectly Iron Man that in itself is a thing to appreciate. And like, there's been 3 or 4 Hulks in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
And you know, what's his face?
Eric Bana.
The current one.
No, I said Eric Bana. Holy shit. He was the first one. Mark Ruffalo.
Mark Ruffalo is like, he like nails it.
Yeah.
So they do find, I mean, then they're willing to pay these actors, and they do find kind of the perfect person to play these superheroes. So there is just something about that nature, and they look like they're having fun.
I mean, it's insane. So the Avengers game is coming out. Everyone's complaining about it because the characters don't resemble the movie Avengers. So like this is how ingrained these films are into popular culture at this point.
Right.
Is that people are upset that Robert Downey Jr. is not Iron Man in the game.
Yes.
Right.
When
they didn't want to have to pay them their likenesses.
Correct. Correct. So like, you know, different artists have different takes on the characters, and he's looked different through the years. He hasn't always looked like Robert Downey Jr. But...
Right. But he so much feels like Iron Man.
Yeah.
Even like the first Iron Man, I was like, oh, he's been Iron Man forever, right? And
right.
Like, not, you know.
Yeah.
And like you said, it came out in 2008, so 12 years ago. I felt like he's been Iron Man since I was a baby.
Yeah. It feels like it's been that long.
So my biggest problem with Marvel is that their villains are terrible. And it wasn't until Avengers Infinity War where they got Josh Brolin to play Thanos. And it was, I think, a cultural phenomenon, because the whole, like, you know, snap your fingers and then half the world disappears was like not just within comic book nerds. It was like everywhere on TV shows, I think Trump said it once or twice. So like everyone had this idea because he was such a compelling character, and even him as a villain, you're like, he's got a good point. What if we did cut half the population and we did it randomly? So it's like there's something there that we can kind of sink our teeth into.
Yeah.
And then with Endgame, they sort of ruined the whole thing and just hit the reset button. But I was so excited after Infinity War because I was like, oh, finally they figured something out. And it's becoming like an actual cinematic movie. And it's like, this might be best picture quality stuff. And then going to see Endgame, the theater was packed. Every screening had Endgame playing at every 15 minutes. I think I took a picture at the ArcLight, and it was like literally every 15 minutes, and they're all sold out. And just sitting there and being so bored. And then once the big battle scenes, just seeing like nerds across from me like cheer up, and like so excited to just see Iron Man shoot plasma out of his hands. And it's like, oh, okay, I get why this movie is exciting. It's not filmmaking. It's like, look how cool this is. Look how cool.
Right. They want to see the characters from Guardians team up with Hulk or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even they did that in a clever way, because Guardians has a different tone than the other movies.
Right.
And they somehow kind of put that in there and had Thor kind of become less serious and more fun.
Which was the right call.
Yeah, exactly. And then they had Fat Thor, which is, now you're milking it. But there was it looked like they had some idea. There's some artistry there. But in the end, they always fuck it up.
Okay, all right. I like how like we're just instantly going to the Marvel comic universe. That isn't even the only comic book movies out there.
Well, see, the DC ones are like, it's like punching down, right? The DC ones are not great, and I think they know it as well.
Do you think it's because, okay, now I'm going to preface this by saying, like, I don't have the greatest knowledge of comic books.
Yeah.
DC heroes like Superman, for example, are less interesting because they just are invincible. It's hard to have the origin story like you do for Spider-Man or Iron Man because they just seem like these pristine characters that just have these automatic abilities that will always work.
Are limitless. Yeah. But I feel like, Tim Burton really nailed it, especially with Batman Returns. And just that world is so kooky and specific that you're like, it might not make the most sense, but it's such a fun, weird world. And with Marvel, it's so grounded in reality. And I remember watching this video where they actually, like, the color of the movies all felt kind of gray and boring.
In which movies?
In the first, 5 Marvel movies.
Yeah, a bunch of them do have kind of a muted color palette.
Yeah.
But aren't they much brighter now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like after,
very
I want to say
shiny.
Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok was the one that was like, we can make it bright and
I think
comedy.
it started with Guardians.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was just going to make a point about the timeline of like the trends of these comic book movies since the 90s. It just seemed like back then, any comic book movie that came out was like very serious and very dark.
Right.
Like Spawn.
I think because
was
of
super dark.
Batman.
I think
success,
until
yeah.
like Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man came out, I think that embraced kind of the spirit of the comic books in a way that we
Right.
hadn't really seen before.
If you look at the newer Marvel movies now, it's so opposite. There's so much humor in them.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not taking seriously. Like, there's never a doubt that they're going to die or whatever.
Yeah. And even the compositions of the shots and the color palette and everything, it's just bright.
Yeah.
That's become Marvel's look compared to
Yeah.
DC. It's funny, all our movies are, for these 3 movies, I paid close attention to when they came out to see the context of what the world of comic book movies looked like at the time. Mine was
interesting.
2005, which was before Marvel Cinematic Universe even started,
Right.
for example.
So we're talking about Marvel movies and DC movies and all, but so why pick movies that aren't those?
I think, first of all, it's sort of like low-hanging fruit, right? If you're going to do comic book movies, the obvious choice would be any of the best comic book movies that have come out in the last 5 years.
I think you're right. I think if we just did comic book movies, I would have picked a Batman.
It's too broad and it's too easy. And lots of people talk about the value of those movies. And also, I think that like the film industry right now is so oversaturated with comic book movies, and it bothers the crap out of me that like it's so dependent.
And it's
on
seeping into television as well.
You're not allowing for other creative ideas to come forward. You're so dependent on the tentpole big superhero movie.
Yeah.
So
are
I
you
thought
okay
this-
with indie superhero movies though? Like, because Bright came out. I guess he's not a superhero, but
Right.
a lot of TV shows are doing it too.
Well, I think the problem is that all of them want to tell that heroic story of, that good versus evil thing. I think where Marvel is sort of going to recalibrate, I hope, is that they're going to start, you take that superhero mold and you tell different kind of stories. So like Black Widow clearly looks like a spy movie, and I'm pretty sure that's what it is. The new Doctor Strange is going to lean more on horror. Guardians, that's like sci-fi comedy. So you got to get these interesting filmmakers in there and actually utilize what they bring to the table and not sort of make them fit in that mold, which I think Disney is doing that DC is not doing.
Disney is doing
that.
Marvel
and
Marvel.
Warner Brothers with DC Comics, they're not doing that at all.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, like I guess my point is just that this would force us to pick movies that would probably be older, maybe pre-Marvel Comic Universe. Just pick things that take us back to a different era of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I appreciate it because superheroes, they're a bigger part of our lives, and I think years and years ago they were just for nerds and people were picked on because they like superheroes and stuff, or any type of fantasy. Like even I would fit Lord of the Rings in that kind of category of nerdy.
Yeah.
And now it's so open that it's like like to like superheroes is actually the opposite of nerdy. You're kind of lame if you're just like into superheroes and that's it. But to pick ones that aren't mainstream, or ones that like probably have a smaller budget is more interesting, because you don't need all the glitz and glam to actually make a compelling story about superheroes.
Yeah. No, that's very true. I think we should get started.
Zach, you want to start us off?
Yeah, since it's my choice, I get to go first. And this week I picked a personal old favorite of mine called Sky High.
Here's how power placement is going to work. You will step up here and show me your power. Yes, you will do so in front of the entire class. I will then determine where you will be assigned. Hero or sidekick.
It's Disney, but it's Disney before they own Marvel, so I guess...
Well, it's not Marvel, yeah.
This is a weird one because it wasn't like it came out when I was the age that I was the target demo. I was like in college, I think. A lot of my friends wanted to see it.
Yeah, it was probably me.
Our mutual college friends, too.
Yeah.
Wanted to go see it. So here's my case for this movie being good. Because I saw the reviews. I saw all the things about this movie being maybe derivative of other things and all that. But I think it is genuinely a good movie because it's doing exactly what Pixar does. It's a family-friendly movie that's meant for kids, but like adults can enjoy it for various reasons.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Pixar is more clever, but okay.
Maybe they're more clever, but I just feel like the combination of the music, the adult humor, the casting, the family-friendly premise make this like a really fun comic book movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has that formulaic, fun, not going to push the envelope, but just fun movie.
It's got this very John Hughes feel. It's trying to like tug on those nostalgic heartstrings of classic high school teen movie. And it has all of those elements, but it puts them into like a superhero high school environment. Even when it comes to like the music, for example, it's all 80s music.
I think they're all covers, and that bothers me.
That they're all covers?
Yeah. I mean, what I would have done is just set the movie in the 80s. I think it would have been great. And
just
use the real songs. Yeah. But maybe in 2005 the world wasn't ready for that 80s throwback nostalgia.
And the thing is, like, all the kids that it was meant for, they don't know those songs.
Yeah.
Right.
The adults are the ones that appreciate it.
Right.
But anyway, back to the plot. Very simply, is like you have your main character, Will Stronghold, of the Stronghold family. And his parents are superheroes. They're like the most famous superheroes. Steve Stronghold, the commander, and then his wife Jetstream, played by Kelly Preston, rest in peace.
Mm-hmm.
Very sad. And he's going to his first days of high school, and in the universe of this movie, you get your powers like you hit puberty. Like that's sort of
It's much like Harry Potter in that once you reach a certain age, you go to this school and then you start learning about this magical thing.
Yeah, it is a lot like Harry Potter.
I don't know if I agree with it. It's a lot like Harry Potter.
I think overall.
Well, I mean, just in the sense that like you reach an age and then you start going.
Yeah.
Like as children, they know their parents are superheroes or that they're related.
Yeah,
to
they always
superheroes in some
know,
way.
and they're waiting to get their powers.
Yeah.
It's not like they have them yet, and they might not get them.
Right.
Point is, then you go into high school and you're either a superhero or a sidekick, depending on like what your power is.
The Sorting Hat.
A good portion of the movie is just Will Stronghold trying to figure out who he is, what group of people he fits in with, and like normal high school stuff. But of course, compounded by the fact that he doesn't have any superpowers to begin with.
And he's expected to be the
best.
the successor to
Like Harry Potter.
Space Superman.
Yes, because he's the Harry Potter of this universe.
Right.
Yeah, because he's got the most famous superheroes. So he's supposed to be the best, but he's got nothing.
So in the sense that it's like it's a teenager going to a new school where everyone is cooler or more popular than he is, and there's an expectation for him to be the coolest or the most popular by his parents.
And he gets
or smartest. That's the cliche of every teen movie Disney ever made, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Any high school drama or teen drama.
Yeah.
Really. I'll bring up John Hughes again. I feel like they're really going for that tone to a new audience.
And I think they know they're playing with all those tropes because of all the musical cues.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's probably the first act. And he eventually does get his powers. Like, you were alluding that some of them don't get it, but I don't think anyone never gets powers, right?
No, the bus driver doesn't get his power.
Oh.
But he
The bus
finds,
driver.
he
He's
like
finds
the-
it inside.
He's like the janitor guy in Harry Potter. What's his name? Finch? Is that his name? Flitch?
I guess so. Oh yeah, I forgot that you're a huge Potterhead.
A pothead.
I mean, J.K. Rowling aside, I think it's a decent story. But
Yeah.
I like Harry Potter. I do like
Yeah.
it. I guess in preparing to defend this movie, I put together like my case.
I don't think you need it.
The strongest case I have for this movie is the casting, which is brilliant. I think the reason that as a young adult I still wanted to go see this movie is because they made awesome casting choices. Just to go through some of them, Kurt Russell and Kelly Preston as the main heroes, out of the gate, that's amazing. The other adult characters in the film are equally awesome.
So, yeah, Kurt Russell being Superman makes the most sense, right?
Yeah, and it's just cool to
and
see.
he's Disney's guy.
I mean, you have Linda Carter plays a role. I mean, that would only really
Principal.
be as the principal, and that would really only make any sense to an older audience. You have Bruce Campbell, which is honestly like one of the best casting choices in the movie.
Yeah.
And then the two other main teachers are played by two kids in the Hall alum, Dave Foley and Kevin McDonald, who are hilarious in this movie and perfectly cast. Even the minor roles, which I didn't even realize at the time, the voice of SpongeBob is briefly in the movie. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, he was at the end. He was at the end. They were moving into the new house, and Sky High was about to fall onto it.
Oh.
And also Patrick Warburton is the voice of Royal Pain.
Yeah, which is odd.
Odd, but kind of hilarious.
Perfect.
And my favorite, the guy who plays the bus driver, is Farva from Super Troopers.
Well, I thought you were going to say Jim Rash, a.k.a. the Dean from Community.
Is he in this?
Oh, yeah.
He
wait,
was
is
that
he
jester.
The sidekick?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Jester guy.
Not to mention, the younger cast turned out to be full of people that went on to be successful adult actors. The main character, Will, played by Michael Angarano, I think he had a fair amount of success as an adult. I think he's still around, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's in This Is Us, so
That's not bad.
Big.
That Wait, he's in that? No, that's pretty cool.
I guess so. I'm just looking at his. Oh, he's in Dollface, which I enjoyed. Yeah, it seems like he's bouncing from TV show to TV show.
And then Mary Elizabeth Winstead went on to
she's
have...
the big one, and she is that's the twist. She's actually the villain. She's
actually
her
the
own
villain.
grandmother, or
She's
is
her own...
doesn't age.
Yeah. That was kind of a moment for her. Like, I feel like that was surrounded by other big roles that kind of made her blow up.
Yeah, she
Like,
did
I know-
like Final Destination 3, this, and I think Scott Pilgrim was shortly after this.
Wasn't she in a Die Hard or no?
She was in Live Free or Die Hard around this time as well.
Yeah.
I mean, this is in the
So
middle
she
of
was
her
getting there,
blowing
and she
up.
clearly wants to do action-y stuff. Actually, I know she's in a movie, believe it's called Kate, where she plays like an assassin, coming out soon.
Oh,
Nice.
yeah.
And then my personal favorite is the kid who played Zach, my namesake, so my favorite character
Right.
in the movie.
Which I'm
is,
now realizing is why you like this movie.
I mean, his superhero power is to glow. But that's played by Nicholas Braun, who just got nominated for an Emmy for his role in Succession.
As Cousin Greg.
Cousin Greg.
Who arguably is the best character on the show.
It's amazing. And like you could sort of even see in this little hints of like uncomfortable character choices.
Yeah, his aloofness.
That make him what he is in that TV show. So that was enjoyable to see a pretty great cast put together for this movie.
Let's talk about some of the powers they have, because some of them are they just happen to be helpful. So Kurt Russell is Superman. Can he fly, or does his wife just pick him up?
He's just strong.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like he can fly because his wife carries him around.
So his wife can fly, and he's very strong. And then Will eventually has both abilities. Yeah, he's strong and he can fly.
Which makes him better even more powerful than his parents.
He lucked out.
Right. So Zach, you said, can glow.
Yeah, I mean, that's why he's a sidekick. That's why they separate them.
I'm not sure how that is ever helpful. And I can't even remember how it was helpful in the movie. I'm trying to remember.
They were crawling through the vents and it was dark.
It
was dark. No one had a flashlight.
I mean, it is a Disney movie, so, everyone is a winner in the end. Even the kid, the kid that turns into a puddle even has a use at the end.
Yeah, somebody slips.
And
Someone
the
who's
guinea
super
pig
fast
girl.
can slip.
Yeah, they all have their purpose.
Yeah, I can understand, morphing into a guinea pig. So I thought she was saying she was a change into animals, but she can only change into a guinea pig?
Supposedly.
Yeah, that's the thing. She's a shapeshifter, but she can only take one shape.
I see that power being somewhat helpful. I mean, even I guess a puddle could be helpful if you're trying to get away, and people are like, what's this puddle doing here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, Dave Foley doesn't even have a power as far as I can tell.
Who
That's
doesn't have
true.
a power?
That is true.
The teacher?
The teacher, Mr. Boy.
Mr. Boy.
So I guess sidekicks are just people with powers that are either really shitty or non-existent.
Yeah, which makes them not cool and part of the loser crowd as conceived by this concept.
Right.
And I see no problem with I mean, in terms of a movie.
See no problem with segregating a school like that.
No, I mean, I see no problem with the premise of the movie.
Yeah, I can see how that's just a fun thing, but I wish they would somehow use it to its benefit. You know, I wish like they're not just sidekicks, but like if the guy turns into a puddle, maybe he hasn't unlocked his full potential and he can utilize water in some way. Stuff like that, where I'm like, oh, that would be interesting to see a kid that thinks this is as good as it gets, and then have the confidence to kind of build on that.
I guess,
Especially
but
for
I
a
think
kids
the point
movie.
they're making in the movie is that like everyone's
Special.
good as they
Necessary.
are. They're all special as they are. You don't need to be more.
They
than-
could have explored that in the sequels that never happened, or the TV series that never
Yeah.
came to fruition.
I do admit that this movie doesn't really have any business being as good as it is. And I think it is good because of the casting choices and some of the other like directorial choices that kind of make it more fun and interesting than it could have been. I love that there's a character called War and Peace. That's amazing.
War and Peace is my favorite character in the
Yeah,
movie.
he's
And that
awesome.
actor, Stephen Strait, is the star of The Expanse. I was looking at him and I was like, wait a second, I really recognize this guy. And yeah, he's really good. And he was really good in this movie. It was his first role.
He reminded me of that guy from the wolf from
Twilight?
Taylor
Yeah.
Lautner.
yeah, he's got
I was
Taylor-
getting like a Timothy Oliphant or like James Franco
Oh,
vibe
interesting.
from him.
What's funny is like he doesn't look like as much of a badass as he did back then.
Completely. Yeah. It was the leather and the fire.
Yeah, so there's also like a love triangle sort of in this movie. So basically when Will gets his powers, he starts getting real cocky in some way, or he
He
forgets
joins the cool kids and like
yeah, and he falls in love with Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Winstead, because she's sort of tricking him into betraying his friends and stuff, and we come to find out that it's all a big plan to sneak into the lair of
And get the pacifier.
and get the pacifier, which turns
Pacifier turns everyone into babies,
Yeah.
nulling all of their powers.
making them sort of useless,
Yeah.
which is
No,
great.
you know what her game was? She was going to raise them to be villains.
As villains.
Yeah, which I think is brilliant.
It's a good plan.
That's so much goddamn work, though.
It's
Yeah, it
He's
really
gotta
We're going to
raise-
raise 40 babies?
it's stuff like that, like where there's that scene where they're having a hard time with the baby seats.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like that's such a funny thing to do in a movie right then and there.
Right.
I find all that stuff to be just very pleasant to watch. I don't
Yeah.
know.
That describes this movie perfectly. It's very pleasant.
It's very pleasant to watch, man.
Yeah. No, I think you're right in that it's just like kind of mind-numbing fun, but it's not like provoking any thought for me.
I think that the plot is interesting enough that
Yeah.
not everyone is just going to see it coming. I don't think you're necessarily going to think that Mary Elizabeth Winstead's the bad guy.
Yeah, that's a total like left turn. It wasn't like, oh, it wasn't because they kept doing this thing where they were like showing the villain, and she's like sitting in a chair and you can't see her, and she has a different
Yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like
Patrick
they did
Warburton.
nothing to try and help us. All we know
No,
is
they
that
did. They did though.
how
We had
did
the
they?
dean there.
What's that?
Dean
Chris?
from Community. He was the jester.
Oh,
Yeah, he was there. And then he was her dad when she came home that night.
right. If you're paying
Right.
attention, it's the same guy. But also, they keep showing the yearbook, and they keep showing a girl that looks exactly like her
Yeah.
in the yearbook. Like there are little details that can get you back to.
That makes sense that she's the villain.
Yeah,
I mean, I see what you're saying, and like it could have just made sense that she was like her granddaughter or her niece or something.
right. But
Right.
the thing is that the pacifier worked on her, turned her into her baby, and then her henchman raised her as her
Right.
dad.
Yeah.
Like, so
As-
so
Which
it
I-
kind of
it's
is.
pretty clever.
It is her dad, kind of.
Kind
But
of
then-
weird, also.
Some of the comedy too is the style of Dave Foley and the other teacher. It's very like goofy.
Mhm.
It's sort of like a different kind of humor, and they sprinkle that in throughout, which is I think really great.
Yeah.
Like they'll be off to the side, just like having these little random asides that are only funny to adults who know who they are,
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, they let them do what they do, you know?
And like Bruce Campbell gets to be like his Bruce Campbell self.
Kind of blowhard, cocky guy.
That his superpower was yelling loudly.
Just yelling, yeah.
Yeah, like a sonic boom. I will say this too, like some even though the effects have not aged well, but like look at any movie from that era and it's probably the same thing. I think some of the action is pretty damn cool. Like there's a lot of practical stunt work in the movie. People like flying through walls and hitting like pillars, and I think it looks pretty damn good. The fight in the lunchroom where they're like crashing through tables, I think that's got some merit too.
And then I think we should do this with all 3 of these movies. Is like what year it came out. It's 2005, so
Right.
It's pre-Marvel, and it's in the era where there's a lot of dark.
Well, it's pre-Disney Marvel. Because
it's pre-Disney.
Blade and X-Men existed.
Pre-MCU.
Fantastic
Pre-MCU.
Four, I think, existed.
Yeah. But I feel like we're in a time
existed.
frame where there's a lot of like dark, serious movies.
Well,
like
I think
this.
Spider-Man was probably the biggest superhero movie. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think it came out that year, but I think or maybe it did. But I think like that was the biggest thing. Spider-Man that broke records.
I do appreciate that it's a lighthearted movie.
I honestly was shocked to hear that this came out in theaters because it totally seems like a made-for-TV
with that
movie.
cast.
Well, the thing is, like, besides Kurt Russell, I mean, Kids in the Hall guys, they're not movie stars. They do a sketch show.
Right.
I feel like it's funny because this movie kind of does time trick on me where I think I saw it as a kid, but it coming out in 2005, I was in high school. So
The Mandela effect.
I couldn't help thinking, like, with the look of it, the color palette, and even a lot of the canted angles, it reminded me of like some of the Marvel movies that came out later.
I think they were aping Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in a lot of
you
shots.
think so?
Yeah, the canted angles.
yeah, I think a lot of this movie is derivative of
Spider-Man.
teen movies and superhero movies. Like, I'm sure someone pitched, what if we had high school students as superheroes?
Yeah.
And then they just like picked a bunch of movies that they want to look that they wanted to look like.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I feel like this movie. I think that's my trouble with it, is that it doesn't feel like it's a unique thing. Where the idea seems sort of unique, right?
Mm-hmm.
High school, like a high school filled with superheroes and not children. But it so much feels like Spider-Man.
So is that your only beef with this movie, Samer?
First of all, it's Disney, so I know like they're not necessarily coming at it with an artistic angle all the time. And I think this one does a better job than most movies that try to like kind of copycat other movies and make a profit off of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a little bit of uniqueness to it, but it still falls under that like this is a money grab type of movie.
Okay. Chris, what do you think?
I think it's fine family entertainment. I liked it when it came out. I liked it when I watched it the other day. Like parts of it made me laugh. I think the cast is fantastic, even the tertiary characters. But, you know, it is what it says on the tin. It's not like it is not thought-provoking in any way. It is entertaining though.
That's fair. Yeah, I'm a firm supporter of this movie, more so than I think Samer or even Chris.
I would have liked to see a sequel.
I think they could have made a sequel or like reboot this in a way that might be interesting. It seems like, just going back to my point, it seems like the writers for these movies are just writers from other Disney
Products.
Yeah. Kim Possible.
The
Big Heroes.
director, I looked him up.
He's like a big-time animation director.
He's mostly animation, and he's still
Right.
doing things.
Which makes sense because that sort of animated film style is what
Yeah.
this movie is.
My thought that it feels a bit like an animated Pixar kind of movie.
Yeah.
I will say, just looking at this director's credits, he did Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo, which is the only one that I'm like looking at like, oh, that's probably bad. Especially if you're doing kids movies.
That was
for the
before
most
this,
part.
right?
It was in 99, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
But he also did, and I'm not sure if you guys remember this show, Greg the Bunny.
Yeah.
No.
Wasn't that Seth Green?
Yeah, and Eugene Levy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Which,
wow.
if you're a fan of Schitt's Creek, you might like that show. But I remember thinking it was really funny and absurd. And that's, that especially with Eugene Levy, I wonder if that's how he kind of got in contact with the Kids in the Hall guys.
Interesting.
But let's move on to
Let's move on to the next movie.
Chris.
Let's move on to something that's actually adult.
Right.
Very adult. This is as far on the other end of the spectrum as you can get.
Too adult.
Shit.
It was funny watching all these movies together because of that reason.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, this is where my sense of humor is, apparently.
Let me ask you guys a question, because I just want to kind of give an idea for the audience. Do you guys watch these movies back to back to back, or how do you usually spread it out?
I did 3 nights, 3 movies.
Yeah, usually.
And then a bonus
3
movie
movies.
afterwards, which I'll talk about later.
Ooh,
Oh,
I did
wow.
watch a movie in between these movies too, but I watched. So once we decided on it, I watched Sky High immediately, just to be like, all right, I remember this the most. This will be easy watching. Put it on, and I got exactly what I was expected. And then I sort of waited for, especially my movie, because I feel like that is the slowest. I ended with Super because everyone says this is a fun, great movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like, all right, I'm not going to read anything. I don't know what to expect. But Chris, go ahead.
All right, so my film is the 2010 James Gunn movie Super.
All it takes to be a superhero is the choice to fight evil.
Shut up, crime.
So it stars Rainn Wilson. He plays Frank Darbo. He's just a line cook at a diner in a small town. He's in love with his wife, who's played by Liv Tyler.
Great cast.
That's a combo I just don't understand.
Exactly.
Yeah, very strange, but this is a great cast too.
His wife's a recovering addict. She's kind of got some ties to, some shady guys. I don't know if she gets taken. She doesn't really get taken, but she's kind of under the influence of Kevin Bacon. And he's a drug dealer. Frank's down on his luck. He doesn't know what to do. He watches these Christian TV series starring Nathan Fillion, and James Gunn plays the devil in them. And he sort of gets an epiphany about becoming a superhero and fighting crime. He turns himself into the Crimson Bolt. He does research by going to a comic book store and meets Ellen Page, who works at the comic shop, and she becomes his sidekick. Essentially from there, they're fighting crime, not major crimes or anything, and
They're just beating people up, basically.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
just beating people up. When I picked this movie, I saw what you guys had picked, and I thought, all right, your movies are not based on comics. I'm not going to pick one, even though we're doing like movies that aren't Marvel or DC. I'm going to also pick one that's not based on a comic book, because if I did that, I probably would have picked like Kick-Ass or Hellboy, which are clearly much better films than Super.
Wait, Hellboy isn't
I
DC?
thought that was like
Hellboy
yeah.
is Dark Horse, and I think Kick-Ass is as well. Not Marvel or DC, but Dark Horse is pretty major, and I think those properties are pretty well known. So I wanted to pick a movie that wasn't that well known, and also I'm a huge fan of James Gunn. He did a movie called Slither before this in 2006, which I think is a excellent horror film. Really holds up quite a bit better than Super. As everyone knows, James Gunn eventually made Guardians of the Galaxy. He's got a very subversive sense of humor. Super is R-rated. It's got some pretty politically incorrect humor in it. It's got some shocking violence in it, which always stood out to me. And also just the cast. You have these people that are kind of friends with James Gunn that have appeared in all of his films. Like Michael Rooker plays one of the henchmen. Greg Henry, who plays the detective, was in Slither. He was in Guardians. Sean Gunn is one of the other henchmen. That's James Gunn's brother. He was the
in
stand-in.
a lot of his movies.
Yeah, he's the stand-in for Rocket Raccoon when they filmed the Guardians
Wow.
movies. So yeah, it's kind of like a very low-budget family affair. I was a huge fan of James Gunn for a while now. He wrote the Dawn of the Dead remake, which I think is a really good... I'm not always into remakes, but I think that's like one of the best ones. It might even be on par with the original. At the same time, James Gunn did get his start in trauma films, writing Tromeo and Juliet. So I think as far as the trauma and mainstream spectrum of the films, Super is heavily towards the trauma end. In fact, Lloyd Kaufman, the head of trauma, is in the movie. The movie... I saw it when it came out. I didn't quite remember all of it. I definitely didn't remember some of the homophobic stuff. But at the same time, I really enjoyed it. I think Rainn Wilson's performance is really good.
Rainn Wilson is underrated. I mean, it's unfortunate that everyone just thinks of him as Dwight from The Office.
Yeah.
Because I think
This is probably him trying to get out of that mold.
Yeah, and I think it would be a good attempt, but I think you're right in saying that it is problematic, and not only are there like vicious violence that seemingly is like, not only is it cartoony, but it's like it's unwarranted half the time. Like
Paints him in a
it
really
doesn't
bad
necessarily
light.
need to be this violent. I don't quite get why it is this violent. There's also a rape scene, a female on male rape scene.
Yes, I forgot about that.
So Ellen Page is Rainn Wilson's sidekick.
Yeah, Bolty.
Begrudgingly. He doesn't want a sidekick and just kind of needs one because he was shot once.
Yeah, she sort of talks her way into it.
And she's so turned on that she knows a superhero that she like rapes him and like puts the mask on him to rape him. Yeah, it was especially at the end. And I think like the biggest problem with this movie is that it's incredibly uneven. Yeah. Because Frank Darbo, Crimson Bolt, first of all, he goes in there, he doesn't have superpowers, so he just buys weapons like Batman would.
Yeah.
And he buys a wrench, this like giant wrench, and then just starts beating people in the head with it and like cracking their skull open.
Yeah, indiscriminately. Yeah.
And then once he gets Ellen Page as a sidekick, she goes to this kid's house that like scratched her car or something.
Oh, played by Matt Saracen, Friday Night Lights.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, wait, isn't Matt Saracen his character's name?
Yes. I don't remember his real name.
Whatever. He'll always be Matt Saracen, unfortunately. So she like smashes his head open with like a vase or something. And then for whatever reason, the Crimson Bolt freaks out. Like he hasn't been doing this throughout the whole movie.
He did worse in the line cutter.
Yeah. And he's like, you're not supposed to kill him. And it's like, what were you thinking? What were you doing with the wrench?
He did so many things that probably caused death.
He never said, do what I do. He said, do what I say.
So that part was uneven. And I think it's like, I'm sure James Gunn did it for comedic value. It sort of came off as like, this is like kind of gross now.
Yeah.
So later on in the movie, Crimson Bolt and Ellen Page just have like this nice chat. And then Ellen Page starts to have feelings for him. And he's like, can I kiss you? Can I make out with you? And the Crimson Bolt's like, no, you're my sidekick and I'm married, because he still believes he's married to Liv Tyler. And instead of it being like an awkward scene after that, they just go to the gun store and buy a bunch of guns. Part of me is like, I guess that's interesting that they're like subverting our expectations. Yeah. But it almost seems like they just pick and choose whenever they want to feel emotional. Because, spoiler alert, when Ellen Page dies at the end, he's incredibly emotional. That's what I mean by uneven. And like,
it's almost like it surprises them, but they're the ones bringing like heavy artillery to this fight.
Yeah.
Well, I think they think they're invincible, like especially Ellen Page. Like she is so cranked to 11 in the superhero mode, and then 2 seconds later she gets a shotgun blast to her head and half her head is blown off. And I think what I like about this movie is how it does subvert a lot of those expectations. The detective is just sort of casually gunned down in Frank's house. Yeah. And it's like, holy shit, it happened so quickly you don't even realize what happened at first. Yeah, and Bolty is killed, and then, towards the end where they're just like blowing people up with pipe bombs. And he stabs Kevin Bacon to death, and it's like you want to see him get it, but also it's kind of brutal and you feel uncomfortable about it.
Because, well, first of all, Liv Tyler's saying like, don't stab him.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just going to do this anyway. I just read today that originally the role of Kevin Bacon was supposed to be played by Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yes.
But he didn't show up.
His name is Jacques. And they couldn't get a hold of Van Damme, and he lost the role.
On IMDb, it's saying Gunn said the guy went AWOL and just couldn't risk that personality on this movie, which I think is funny.
Yeah, he's got problems, but that would have been interesting. I think
that would have been interesting. Yeah,
although, I mean, Kevin Bacon does play a good sleazeball.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if there would have been more action, because he doesn't really do any action-y scenes.
Could you imagine?
I wonder if JCVD would do that.
I highly doubt there would have been like a fight scene in the movie.
Well, then why have JCVD?
I don't know. I think, it would have been using him as sort of a Tarantino-esque casting choice, Let's cast this actor that's only known for one thing as a sort of sleazy drug dealer in this small town America.
I could see that.
How does Kevin Bacon feel about being second choice to Jean-Claude Van Damme?
I wonder if he did it as like a favor.
Oh, probably. Yeah. You could tell that it didn't require much of him. Like, he didn't need to be there. He probably shot that in like a week.
Couple scenes, yeah.
There are 2 locations, the house and in front of that strip club, that they go to every day.
Yeah. This is probably the lowest budget of the 3 movies we picked.
It kind of felt gritty and indie in the same way that like Juno did.
Yeah,
You know
it
what I
does
mean?
have a very indie feel to it.
So it's like take Juno, make it like a hard R action hero movie, and then you got this.
I mean, what's amazing is the next movie he did was Guardians of the Galaxy.
Wow. I wonder if Ellen Page did this because she was trying to get out, like break out of the
Juno cutesy
the
roles.
playing high school, or I mean, it's almost like for her and Rainn Wilson was trying to like break out of the molds that they had been in previously.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised because like you were saying, like there's a lot of questionable lines in this movie.
Yeah,
I'm surprised, like knowing how outspoken someone like Ellen Page is now, that she did this movie.
It is surprising. And, James Gunn did have that thing where he was canceled for a while because of those old tweets. I don't believe that he's a homophobe or a racist or anything like that. He's got that sort of edgy, subversive sense of humor, and that comes from like a background in trauma films where nothing is off limits.
Yeah, this feels like nothing's off limits in this movie.
Right. And,
It really
yeah,
does.
He wrote a web series called PG Porn. So
This does seem like the South Park guy, like right up their alley. But
Yeah.
Team America and like Orgasmo. Like this actually reminded me a lot of Orgasmo.
Yeah, there's
I
a lot of
should've picked
movies.
that.
There's a lot of movies like this too. I mean, Kick-Ass is exactly the same thing. Also super violent.
And Kick-Ass came out the same year. And it's kind of funny.
Right. And I think that was the problem. People accused James Gunn of ripping off Kick-Ass with this movie.
Right.
I think it came out a year after.
No, same year, but I don't know when the Kick-Ass comic book came out. I think it was around the same time as the movie was made.
Right.
But,
Chris, I'm going to throw this one out at you. This is going to be a deep cut that only you and I will
Okay.
know.
All right.
Even before, precursor to all that, 2005, that film festival we went to, Captain Blasto.
Captain Blasto, yes. I have the DVD.
They did this little festival in like the suburbs of Chicago, and there was a movie there called Captain Blasto, which is basically, it's very similar to this. Like it's like a low budget indie movie. Normal guy wants to be a superhero.
Yeah.
And he's got a sidekick and like all that.
It's just not hyper violent.
Shout out to Captain Blasto. You guys were ahead of your time.
Oh my God.
Hope they're listening.
Well, let me ask you guys a question, because we've overlooked this big thing, the Christian superhero show he's watching.
That's another incongruous element to the whole thing.
Yeah, in the beginning they set up that he's a very not religious person but spiritual person, and that he has these two moments in his life that was like he was perfect. One being when he married Liv Tyler, and two is when he told an officer this criminal ran into the store, right?
Yeah, stopped a crime.
But then to just watch a Christian show out of no, because it didn't seem like he just had it on one day. It wasn't like he was like obsessed with the show, right?
It's not like that.
Well, he watched it a couple times,
right? But I mean, the first time, which is the reason why he was like, "Oh, I should do something," and then he goes to the strip club and tries to find the girl. Like he's trying to fight. Like the show that he's watching always pushes him to do something.
Yeah, I think because he had those moments in his life where he had received messages from somewhere.
God's voice. Yeah.
That, he put this show on and it was overtly a God type thing. He took that as a message to him to do something.
That scene where they cut his brain open is
right, and then he gets touched by God.
Yeah.
I think it would have sort of made sense for Nathan Fillion to see him in real life. Like they never like meet up or anything. All it is just him watching the show. So
like as a vision, or like he runs into the
like
actor?
he like sees that the Crimson Bolt is like killing people. This is horrible. You should go to church or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that's the superhero from the show, and it changes his way. There really is no growth, right? He's just like, Liv Tyler's taken away from him. He gets pissed off. He turns into a superhero and just starts killing people, and then he saves her. Well, then she leaves him, right?
So I think that's why this movie is good, is the ending of it. It really, to me, it really sticks the landing where a lot of movies don't. She does leave him. And he has that voiceover where he explains, if it hadn't been this way, she wouldn't have met this guy. She wouldn't have started this family. He's looking at his wall and he has all these pictures where he's made these new memories that are like his greatest moments.
Which is...
It seems a little sappy from the previous 90 minutes of the movie, but I also think it's like very heartfelt and emotional.
If they were going to do that, I wish they would have given him something more than a rabbit. Poor guy. He lost his sidekick. And then his wife leaves him.
I like the rabbit.
Yeah, I don't mind the rabbit, but I thought he was like, he drew all these things. It was like he made his own comic book.
Yeah, it feels to me like he's just a sad man again who's clinging on to couple of weeks where he had a good life.
I
in
mean,
his
that
eyes.
might be the case, and that maybe it's not a super happy ending, but he is getting something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kidding about the other thing I just said, but I think that they're saying that he's a happier person in a better place now.
He's also a criminal and a murderer.
Yes, I was
Yes.
sort of thematically, I didn't know what I was supposed to be getting out of this movie because
Yeah.
what I'm sort of taking away from it is that all that selfish violence of his and like the killing spree and all that stuff was actually justified.
Yeah.
It had to happen. He didn't learn that that was a terrible idea. He learned that it was a just mission. And so I was left thinking, like, I don't like that theme. I'm not a fan of that theme.
I feel gross.
It didn't leave a great taste in my mouth. I did appreciate how realistic it was. Like, just because you save this woman, it doesn't necessarily mean she's indebted to you. You know, even though she stayed with him for a bit, he knew it was out of obligation and that she was going to leave. Like, that part actually was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But leading up to that, I was like, why am I rooting for this guy? He's crazy.
I mean, that's fully justified.
Has he done worse than Kevin Bacon? I
That
guess we
we've
don't know.
seen.
Well,
That
yeah.
we've seen.
But like Kevin Bacon is a drug dealer.
He's a drug dealer.
He's got
And
Liv
he did-
Tyler strung out, and he's willing to pimp her out to make a deal.
Kevin Bacon does kill 2 people, but
He shoots the guy that was going to buy from him. Maybe they needed more scenes of him like being evil instead of appreciating Rainn's eggs.
yeah. I think this falls in line with Marvel and where the villain really is not that interesting. And it's all about the superhero and like how cool he can do all this shit.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I didn't like it either. I don't know.
See, I never felt like they presented Rainn Wilson's character as being cool or his violence as being like something you could root for. I always just imagine it as being horrifying because it is. The guy butts in line and he bashes his head in.
Yeah, and people are running
it's
scared.
split down the middle.
Dead.
Yeah.
For some reason, he doesn't die, but he's dead.
He hits his girlfriend too.
Yeah, he hits the woman as well.
Also, just to be clear, he was about to let his friends cut in line too.
Rainn?
He was there to save a spot in line for his friend. So he was about to do the same thing that they just did, which is like save a spot for their friend.
Well,
am I wrong?
they never showed up, so who knows?
Even that is just a coworker asked him to see a movie, and then it's just to set up that he's going to hit someone in public for cutting in line.
Yeah.
It's just like, that is the best idea you came up with to tell that part.
I think there are many more social situations they could have chosen
Yeah,
where he would have been justified to hit this guy.
Well, they didn't. I think story-wise, they didn't want him to be justified. They wanted to like cross that line and then
Yeah,
regret
you
it.
might be right about that.
But that was pretty far out there.
It is hard to root for that guy.
But yeah, you bring up a good point, Samer, that like the villain isn't that interesting.
Yeah.
I like it when the villain has some amount of sympathy. They're not just like bad for bad's sake. Like they have some sort of
They're not just a placeholder bad.
justification behind it. And yeah, Kevin Bacon really doesn't have much justification other than he's a drug dealer, that's a bad guy. And
if you consider the fact that you could easily replace Jean-Claude Van Damme with Kevin Bacon, and it's the same movie, then there's something wrong with that character. At least in my mind. I'm not James Gunn. I mean, James Gunn probably doesn't give a shit what I think, but you know.
He might hear this.
yeah. Right.
Which I want to say I like his movies a lot. This isn't his best by any means. I am it's finished, it's in post-production. He's doing the Suicide Squad. It's very weird that Disney and Marvel fired him briefly. He went over to DC. He's doing the Suicide Squad, which is going to be like a whole different reboot of that universe. Then he's doing Guardians 3 again. So he's got a DC and a Marvel film coming out. I'm very curious because this will be the third go with Harley Quinn, and if it's not good, I'm going to be upset. Some of the actors from Suicide Squad are returning, but it's almost an entirely new cast.
Wow.
Right.
I think he's going to be killing a lot of people. So we'll see. But I'm very interested to know what his Suicide Squad will be.
Well, I think that our discussion on the villains actually leads us to the third movie.
Yeah.
I think that's my favorite villain of the 3 movies.
Yes.
Well, with good reason. So I picked Unbreakable.
I watched the news waiting to hear a very specific combination of words, but they never came. Then one day I saw a news story about a train accident, and I heard them. There is a sole survivor, and he is miraculously unharmed.
came out in 2000, and this is an interesting movie because you could actually argue it's not a superhero movie. It's because it doesn't have any of the superhero elements in most superhero movies.
That was the whole beauty of it at the time, right? Is that was this
Yeah.
it was like a
I mean, that's
low-key-
the beauty of it in my mind, is that there really is no action sequences, maybe one or two. There's very little violence.
Yeah.
right.
And it really just delves deep into the mentality of thinking about who you are and where you fit in this world. And that's really why I enjoyed it, because I think the thing about superheroes and like having to feel like you have to save the world is something that a lot of these movies just overlook, and it never really like kind of delves deep into how awful that feeling might be sometimes. So the plot of Unbreakable is just that Bruce Willis, David Dunn, is on a train and there's a horrible accident, but he's the only one left alive, or right? The only one left not injured.
Not
Yeah,
only
the only survivor.
but not even injured. By the way, that scene in the doctor's office when they're explaining that, I got goosebumps.
Dude, it's so
Yeah.
good. The foreground, did you notice the foreground?
Is it when the body is bleeding and
Yeah, they're like bleeding out.
Oh, yeah.
And the blood is pooling up. Yeah, I thought that was
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
out
that
of
scene gave me
focus.
chills. That was great.
But he just thinks it's a freak accident, and he's had a history of this where he was in a car accident with his wife or his girlfriend at the time and almost died, but he doesn't even remember this, but he helped save her. And all the while Samuel Jackson, who plays Elijah Price, is sort of watching and looking for people with abnormal talents, because he himself is so brittle that when he was born, he was born with broken limbs. So he himself is just so weak and can barely kind of function by himself that he believes that there's someone in the universe that is the exact opposite, is super strong or unbreakable, which is Bruce Willis. They basically meet up and he tells him this theory. Bruce Willis doesn't believe him, and then eventually believes him and becomes the superhero he is, or he is now.
It's such a slow burn too, because that's
Very
slow. That's basically the whole movie, but it's compelling the entire time.
Right. And he also remembers an instance where this is like the plot hole for me, because so he remembers an instance where kids were playing around and like tried to drown him or whatever. He got really, really sick and almost died. So his weakness is water. So Superman's weakness is kryptonite. Bruce Willis's weakness is something that your body has a ton of water.
Which this is funny because everyone bitches about Signs because of the water plot hole there too.
Yeah.
Because the aliens choose Earth and
What's with M. Night in Water? He did Lady in the Water.
he's got a water thing.
The happening plants need water to live.
Well, I think it's, I think the whole idea is that it's turning on. I don't know. Either way, that's my only problem with the movie, is that it doesn't make much sense that water would be your...
I mean, it makes sense to maybe have a fear of water, but obviously anyone can drown.
Right.
Yeah.
I can drown.
Samer, not to poke holes in your thing, but everyone's made up of mainly water and everyone can still drown
Yeah.
from water. So,
No,
so
but-
it's still...
Right.
I think for him it was more, they don't say it, but I think it's just more of like a fear of water.
No, but he can
Right?
drown. Like he can drown.
Well, so can anyone.
The reason why I think this, because in the later, so this is a part of a trilogy,
Right.
and which I argue the other two, Split might be worth watching, but the last one is not.
Mm-hmm.
In the last movie, he's in a fight where it's raining. I believe when he's exposed to water, he's weaker, and he's like,
Oh my God, really?
Okay. So
pretty sure. So and I think that's why he wears this poncho.
that makes sense.
Yeah, when
It
he's out in
weakens
the
him.
rain.
It like dampens his powers.
Right.
Which I
Right,
haven't seen
exactly.
Glass. I will tell you, I watched Split right after Unbreakable, and I hadn't seen
Oh.
Split.
Oh, you hadn't seen Split?
I had not seen
Oh,
Split.
interesting.
So I saw Unbreakable when it hit theaters, and probably like right after when it hit DVD. I forgot how abrupt the ending was.
And
It-
Unbreakable, yeah.
It happens, and then the movie's over, and I was like, wait a second, that's really the ending? So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I need to watch Split, because this is not satisfying me. No, I think Unbreakable is a very good movie, but I think the ending is just, there is no ending.
So the reveal or the twist, as M. Night Shyamalan likes to do in a lot of his movies, even Split,
Yeah.
is that Elijah Price isn't just looking for, or the way he's looking for this supernatural human being is he's causing these mass accidents of hundreds of people dying and whatnot. In an attempt to see if somebody would save him or somebody survive.
Yeah.
And it's because he wants to find where his place in the world is. So he wants to find a superhero because he's a supervillain.
It is a great twist.
Yeah.
Like if you never saw this movie, that's a really good twist. Like
It's
you won't see
excellent.
that coming because they sort of set them up as their friends. And
he's trying to help them.
They have a great rapport, the two actors. But like for me, the problem is that it ends right there with the reveal, and then there's just text on the screen. It's
the
like,
freeze frame thing.
And he gets
got me.
arrested.
David Dunn reported, Elijah, and now he's in an insane asylum, and then it's over.
I wonder if that's because like he got a note that like the ending felt abrupt and they needed to know what happened, and there was no more money. So it's like,
Well,
just
there's
freeze
not even
frame.
like a shot of them carrying him off or the police showing up or anything. It's too abrupt, and you can't even say at the time like, oh, he had sequels planned because Split came out 17 years later.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. But I feel like he was, for whatever reason, he couldn't go straight into a sequel.
Yeah.
See, that's why it's like a weird trilogy, because Split is not necessarily, I mean, it does connect, and when you get to Glass, you see the connection between the three, but it's almost there to reboot the Unbreakable trilogy. So my thinking was that he wanted to do a bunch of these movies, but whatever reason couldn't, so he's like, this is how it ends.
This was
And that
also
the
very early in his career. This is like right
This
after
is his third
The Sixth
movie, I
Sense.
think. Yeah, so Sixth Sense is a huge hit for him, which I would argue
Second film.
Doesn't he have one
after
before Sixth Sense?
Wide Awake? I don't know what that is. Something with Rosie O'Donnell. I think it starts at Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
He wrote some stuff, I think, before that.
He did do 2 films before that.
Notoriously, he wrote a version of Stuart Little.
Oh, wow.
I still think this is probably his best movie. I know people will stan Sixth Sense, but I think this one's is just it's just more fun, and it's, first of all, I just want to say it's a very patient movie. Like, you need to wait. If you're expecting from most superhero movies a lot of action, you're not going to get it from this. There's a lot of weird shots and a lot of shots that just take so long to kind of develop, but as they develop, you're like, whoa, this is pretty cool. There's also a lot of shots upside down, if you hadn't noticed.
Yeah, really good shots.
Yeah, in the beginning, the kid's watching TV upside down. When Elijah gets his comic book, he looks at it upside down. And I think it's to show that because there's a person that's incredibly breakable, there's going to be a person that's unbreakable. Every time evil exists, there's goodness that comes about, so it's showing that duality. I think it's great. It's subtle work that shows that that's how you kind of hint at things in movies.
Watching it back to back with Glass, I was like, oh my God. It reminds you of how good movies look on film compared to digital. Not Glass, sorry, Split and Glass probably, which I plan to watch this weekend.
Let me ask you, like, what was your reaction to Split?
I did enjoy Split quite a bit. I don't think it has the staying power of Unbreakable. I don't know if I'll revisit Split. And in fact, there's like 2 things you could take out of that movie and it wouldn't even tie into Unbreakable at all. So I don't know if they planned that to be part of it or if they added that later and saw that there was potential to bring this back.
That's the thing with M. Night because I do think he's a wonderful filmmaker, and I think he really understands how to create tension and shots and whatnot. Sometimes I'm like, are the twists necessary, or are you just like, is this just your way of like getting people to watch your next movie?
Right.
I think that Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, they feel completely appropriate. Maybe some of his later movies they don't.
Yeah, the twists, yeah.
I like Signs. I like Signs a lot. I'd have to revisit these because it's been so long. I remember Signs was being good. I remember liking The Village too.
I like The Village a lot. I don't know why everyone shits on that one. I thought it was great.
And the twist, I think, in that was really good.
I have to rewatch that one. I have to kind of, because I saw Split and then Glass really rubbed me the wrong way. because I wanted it to be great.
Never good when Glass rubs you the wrong way, man.
Because then he started making movies that just seemed like fun. Like The Visit was kind of fun.
That's that found footage one.
Didn't have that filmmaking thing that he used to do.
It's like he hit rock bottom, and then they were like, "Okay, we'll throw you a bone. You have to make this found footage movie."
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I think he was just like, okay, I need a softball. I need to just do a nice, simple one.
And now I've never seen The Last Airbender, but I actually want to revisit it.
I remember it being very bad.
Or visit it, not revisit it.
The Happening was quite bad.
Oh yeah, very bad.
So the interesting part about M. Night Shyamalan and how he's treating superhero movies is that Unbreakable, like if you actually end up watching all three, Unbreakable is very different than Split. And Split is almost like a thriller suspense with like a lot of action and a lot of like freaky, it's almost like a horror movie in a way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then Unbreakable is not. It's very slow. It's very dramatic. There's a lot of talking. It makes the weight of Split or Glass, or it should have been, more interesting. I think with Glass, I really think they just like ran out of money or something. It really just feels like it ends. It could have been like a great trilogy, and I don't know if it was him or the studios or whatever.
Yeah, it almost seemed like, I haven't seen Glass, but at that point, it should be like Sam Jackson has a crew of bad guys to fight Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
That's what it should have built up to. So I don't know how they do it, but I'm guessing it's not that.
It's not, but it is interesting. But I like how like Sam Jackson as the villain, he understands the dichotomy of being a villain and a superhero. And obviously most people want to be the superhero, but he's accepted his role as a villain, and he wants to see it unfold. Ultimately, you've read so many comic books, you're going to die at the end.
Right.
But just to see it unfold, because he literally has no purpose in life otherwise.
He doesn't even really want him as his foe either. Like, he basically turns himself in. You'd think, I mean, if you're following comic book logic, then he would want to, destroy Bruce Willis as a superhero, but he doesn't even care about that.
Well, I don't think he turns himself in. Bruce Willis also has this power when he touches people, which is another plot hole.
Oh,
it's like a premonition.
He can like see what has happened or what's going. No, it's what has happened.
Yeah, I think so.
Like an experience they had.
He's not a precog.
Yeah.
Post-cog.
Yeah. That's not based on it. Minority Report's not based on a comic book either.
No, a short story.
Oh,
Philip K. Dick.
But yeah, so he has this power, and there's no way he would not have realized that at some point in his life, right?
Well, he always
like
just sort of
touching people, and you're like, wait, I just saw you rob this bank. Like,
he says it that he just sort of brushes it off as intuition.
yeah.
Right.
I thought you were about to go to Sam Jackson doesn't turn himself in, but he does, because he's like, I'm going to shake your hand now and reveal to you.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
He willingly does that.
Yeah.
Get himself caught.
Yeah, it's not like he's trying to pull one over on him.
And it is kind of like the comic book logic where if David Dunn, I think that's his name, David Dunn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If he's like the Batman, then Sam Jackson's like the Joker. And what happens to the Joker most of the time? He's in Arkham Asylum and he's plotting his next move, and then he breaks out. And it's like they would have this eternal conflict of back and forth. And it's kind of sad that they don't do that.
Well, you don't know. You haven't seen Glass yet.
Well, it sounds like they're not doing that.
Yeah, I just want to say that I was at least as much intrigued with Samuel L. Jackson's storyline and sort of arc as I was with Bruce Willis. What's brilliant about this movie is that it's a really wonderful origin story for the hero, but simultaneously another really wonderful origin story for the villain. And
Right.
Totally.
I have honestly probably more sympathy for Mr. Glass than I do for David Dunn. Like, he's been through more, he's suffered more, he's been bullied and picked on more. Meanwhile, Bruce Willis has basically never gotten sick, never gotten hurt, and is just like unhappy with his life. He's just sort of like mopey.
Unhappily married.
You know, he chose to be with his wife, who I guess they're like the other part is they don't really flesh out her character that much. That's another knock on the movie, I would say. But basically, it's just his girlfriend, and stopped him from playing football because apparently he was a great football star because he was unbreakable, you know, and basically robbed him of that path. Yeah, there's some other scenes in this movie where I'm like, that's a little crazy. Like, the kid pulls a gun on him. To prove, like, you won't die if I shoot you. Isn't there another way to prove that this guy is unbreakable?
You didn't like that scene.
No, I'm not saying that I didn't like it. I'm saying that, like, that's a little crazy to think you have to, that's
Well,
what you
it's
have
the
to
kid.
do.
It's kids' logic.
Well, I mean,
He seemed a little old for that kind of logic.
I don't know if a kid is like, let's shoot my dad to find out if he's unbreakable.
Yeah.
I think he's like, why don't we hit him with a hammer or something?
I mean, they do kind of imply that David's not a great dad. He does explain that like the school stuff with the son is his wife's job.
In the opening scene, he like takes off his wedding ring and
Yeah.
starts talking
Yeah.
to this woman.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's not a great husband, but I don't think he was a great father either. But again, like, yeah, the kid pulling a gun was kind of out of nowhere.
This doesn't seem like a kid would do that in my mind.
And wasn't it after the scene with the weightlifting?
Yeah, so there's a scene where they're weightlifting, and
how
he
do they
just
go
keeps-
from like this sort of, I'm Spider-Man discovering my abilities to walk on walls in the alleyway sort of scene where he's lifting the weights to like the kids freaking out and about to shoot him?
Well, there's a scene in between where he's basically like, "It's not true. It turns out that I was, I almost drowned and I don't have any powers."
It just seems like maybe they could have done something else and maybe that's a different movie where he bonds with his son and they discover like his abilities.
That's true. That would be a Disney.
This isn't
That's
that.
what Disney
That would be
take
Sky
it.
High.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the outlier here, but I thought the scene with the gun was powerful. I like that scene.
No, again, I'm not saying it wasn't a great scene. I'm just saying, like, in reality, you would be like, wait, why would this kid pull a gun on his father? Like, it just seems too much.
It
Like,
got my heart pumping. There were so many times in this movie that got my heart pumping. Like for a movie that is so quiet, like you were saying, doesn't give you like these big action set pieces. It really gets the adrenaline going.
it's very suspenseful.
Yeah. My favorite scene in the movie is where Glass is following that guy in the camouflage jacket. He can't keep up and then he falls down the stairs just to see if this guy had a weapon on him. Like,
and it's great. Again, upside down shot too. He sees it upside down.
Yeah, like that's the best scene in the film for me.
That's a great one. That I remember thinking like how, because I hate watching broken bones. Like, that is so gross. That just falling down and
they don't show anything. It's just
no, they don't. But just the noises and you hear his scream. Like Sam Jackson screaming in pain is so. Because he's always such a he's a badass motherfucker, and him screaming in pain is so alarming. What else was I gonna say? When we do these podcasts, we like to find like an ongoing theme between all these movies. Typically speaking, if they're all in the same topic, there's going to be something. And the one thing I did find was like a lot of these movies are about fitting into a world that you might not realize that you are actually better than. So like whether you're a superhero or whether you're like a kid that's doesn't know he has powers to be strong and he can fly, or whether you're a guy that's fighting these drug dealers and, for a just cause for his wife, or you're a guy that his bones can't break, they always have trouble realizing their potential. And, right? Like that seems to be the ongoing theme, is that they just try to fit in and be like, no, I'm just this normal guy. And then all of a sudden they are supernatural in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's totally a theme. And that goes back to like, they're all kind of origin stories.
Right.
We're all seeing origin stories here. Well, at the beginning of the movie, all three of these characters are like helpless. Even Bruce Willis, because he's basically a failure.
Yeah, instead of being a football player, he's a security guard at a football stadium.
Right. And he has like nothing going for him.
Yeah, his wife, his marriage is in shambles. He's not a great father.
Yeah.
Security guard. By the way, that football stadium is where the Eagles used to. I think they used to play there, and now they sometimes will practice there. So years ago, I saw them practice there, and I walked through the whole stadium. It's really, really cool. It's almost like a coliseum.
I like old venues. I mean, that's just it looks almost like Ivy League level, old fashioned.
Yeah.
I kept thinking the movie Rudy. I don't know. It reminded me of Notre Dame.
Yeah. I think Temple still plays there. Maybe that's his college that plays there.
Philadelphia, man. Like M. Night should be your homie.
M Night is always at Sixers games, and I mean, I love that he is first of all a person of color that's a filmmaker and a successful one, but I do wish he had more consistently great movies.
It's coming out of the gate too hot, man. That's what it is.
Well,
It's just like starting off so strong that you have nowhere to go but down.
I don't know. I mean, it could be many different things. So it's so hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean it's oversimplifying it, but there is
Yeah.
this trend in society, especially when things are wildly popular, for there to just to be this awful backlash afterwards.
Yeah.
Anything that gets too popular too quickly, there is inevitably a backlash in the opposite direction. That's what
And
I've
it's like
found.
his films came out, Sixth Sense was like a massive success.
Right.
And it's
He was
like,
just like,
okay, every movie you make now has to have a twist, and everyone wants the twist. After a while, it's like, okay, he's still doing twist movies.
right, yeah.
And then it's like, well, you wanted that, but now you don't. You try something different, it's not a success, and then he gets stuck in that rut. He's definitely got that amazing sort of classic filmmaking style to him. All the shots, everything's so smooth, and like he does this thing in Unbreakable in that opening scene on the train where the camera's panning back and forth. And he does the same thing in Split where they're in the car and the camera's panning back and forth between the rear view or the side mirror and the back seat, and like you don't know James McAvoy's in the car yet. That to me, that's like very it's like a Hitchcockian thing, right? Where he's
like the fly on the wall.
Yeah.
And especially in that opening scene, so it pans back and forth. They're having this conversation, and it's going in between the seats. But then it cuts to a little girl watching him.
Yeah.
So are we supposed to believe the
POV.
little girl is just watching this interaction and like?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was. But it's kind of brilliant.
All right.
I think it was a good pick, Samer.
Yeah,
it's pretty great.
It is the best movie out of this bunch for sure.
For sure, yeah.
Abrupt ending or not, disappointing sequels or not.
Yeah, let's go to some movies that we've missed or we didn't pick.
It is time for honorable mention.
So honorable mentions. We should put like a cue here?
Should we make a little song?
Yeah.
For honorable
like could we all
mentions?
say honorable mentions and then just relap it? So we talked about Sam Raimi and Spider-Man, but he also had a movie called Darkman. So I personally haven't seen it. I'm a little embarrassed to say that because I do like Sam Raimi, and I'm not sure how that got through the cracks.
Yeah, Darkman is really good. Liam Neeson's the lead. Frances
Love him
McDormand is the love interest. It's not based on a comic book. It's an original idea. It's a pretty cool movie. What's funny about Darkman is Sam Raimi has a very identifiable style. Some camera tricks he used in Evil Dead appear in Darkman, and they also appear in Spider-Man. So it's interesting to see this guy who started off with like this very low budget, almost no budget movie, sort of use the same techniques as he got bigger budgets. Like the techniques didn't change, but the money changed. But Darkman's a really fun movie. I think you should watch it.
I definitely will. Some other ones, I remember Mystery Men. That's a really funny
Oh, yeah.
Mystery
movie with
Men.
Ben Stiller, William H. Macy.
Yeah, and I was thinking more along the
Janine
lines.
Garofalo.
I kept thinking about ones that aren't based on comics. Mystery Men is,
Oh, it is?
Hellboy is, and Kick-Ass, of course. But then there's like, we mentioned The Incredibles, which is a really good Pixar movie.
Also with Sam Jackson.
Yeah.
As a Frozone.
There's the movie called Chronicle, which I think is really good.
Right.
That's the one where the teenagers touch like a comet or something.
Yeah,
right?
it's a found footage movie. It's a superhero movie.
Well, then there's Hellboy, obviously. There's Dredd, which I've never actually seen any of them. Judge Dredd or Dredd or
I love
any
Judge
remakes.
Dredd.
I love every iteration of them.
I mean, that's based on a comic book that's been around for like 40 years in the UK. Judge Dredd is really good. I have a soft spot for the Stallone version. A lot of Judge Dredd fans hate it. I think it really holds up. The effects hold up. The production design is incredibly interesting. The new Dredd is more. It's a lot closer to the comics and feel. It's a lot less satirical than the comic books, but it's also a really good action movie.
Here's one that I loved as a kid. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's a good one.
Yeah, there's that.
That's a great one.
Damn, that would have been a good pick, like one of the old 90s.
I mean, Men in Black, that's not really a superhero.
Nah.
No, that is based on a comic book. But there's a lot of comic book movies that aren't superhero movies.
Right.
I know we talked about Scott Pilgrim.
Right, Scott Pilgrim. Kick-Ass, obviously, we talked about that before. That's another one.
Yeah. Kingsman, the first one, is actually pretty enjoyable.
I like those.
Now, is Spawn DC? Is that Dark Horse?
Spawn is
Or-
Image Comics, but
Okay.
it's also a terrible movie. It's got some of the worst CGI you'll ever see in your life. Which, I mean, it's understandable for the time it came out, but also watching that now is just painful.
So speaking of just actually great comics that people should read, if you're into comic books and superheroes, one that was sort of adapted or reimagined as a TV show, Watchmen, which is, I guess, is DC. It's pretty fantastic if you haven't read
really
the comic. I mean, I guess you can sort of skip the movie if you've read the comic, but the book is amazing, and then the TV shows also amazing.
The TV show is fantastic.
It just got nominated for a ton of Emmys.
Yeah, I think it received the most Emmy nominations this year,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. All right, so is there any other movies we missed?
I don't think so.
And if there are, feel free to tweet at us or yell at us or however way you want to tell us that we missed
How wrong we are.
a movie, or you disagree that these movies are terrible, or the ones that we mentioned that we didn't like as much are great and we're stupid. Free to tell us.
And also, as always, hit us with ideas for topics, because we're always looking for new ideas.
Because we'll go through every superhero genre if we have to.
We'll go there, man.
Oh, Highlander is a good one.
Oh, damn. Yeah, that's a really good one.
I was going to say The Toxic Avenger.
It goes on and on. There's a million.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps it up this episode. We hope that you've enjoyed it. As always, you can find us on social media. Samer, where can they find us?
We have a Facebook page, a Twitter page, Instagram, and YouTube, all at A Few Good Movies Pod. And we also have a Gmail account if you want to email us at afewgoodmoviespod@gmail.com.
Stay tuned next week. We'll have a mini episode where we talk about what we've been watching, what we've been playing, and just generally shooting the shit.
And we'll announce a topic for the following main episode. So stay tuned for that. And we will see you next time on A Few Good Movies.